Hi Pragya, this is Murad from VMware. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon, Murad, thank you for joining us. And we have Mr. Nagesh Shashtri, DDG NIC with us, and he will be talking about the key learnings from Aadhaar and various projects that he has been. So over to you, Murad, and welcome, sure. Nagesh, sir.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you are, sir.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Nagesh, sir. This is Murad.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. As Pragya mentioned about the key learnings from large public digital platforms like UPI and Aadhaar, if I may add, I would like to mention a few more large public digital platforms, such as the GST, you are aware, the GST Common Portal, PMJ, GEM, and also NIC's own platform, which is Public Financial Management System developed for Control General of Accounts. So just some time back, DG mentioned about large number of DBT payments being made towards the end of financial year, as well as after the end of financial year during this financial year for facilitating the payments to the beneficiaries of DBT schemes. So PFMS is a platform which enables payment to beneficiaries of DBT schemes, of central schemes, and some of the states also have onboarded. So it's a very, very large platform. Now, the key learnings what we have observed from these large platforms is that these are a combination of centralized and federated architecture. So you can have multiple models when you are building such large platforms. One model could be where entire functionality of the user is performed on the centralized platform. The other model could be the complete functions are performed at the other stakeholders' end. And the third model could be where these two talk together. So part functionalities are performed at the centralized portal and part functions are performed at the other stakeholders' end. And then these two handshake. So GST is a prime example of this, where some of the states have opted for model one, where they collaborate, and the other one where they interact with the GST platform to perform some of their own functions in their own system. So this is another key learning from implementation of these large platforms. And most importantly, use of open technologies. Everything is open, be it technologies or standards or APIs. So if you have if you follow these kind of standards for APIs or for technologies, then achieving integration is not going to be very difficult. These APIs, if they are open, they are put in the public domain, and then other stakeholders can easily adopt to these APIs and integrate with the platform. This is what we have seen in case of all these applications such as GST or GEM or any other platform for that matter. Then regular audits, third-party assessments, and use of encryptions to secure private data is another area which we learned from implementation of this platform. And now, as these platforms become more mature and integrate with more and more stakeholders, the integration of use of emerging technologies such as AI, ML, and analytics will play a major role going forward. So these are some of the key learnings by implementation of these large platforms.
Sure, thank you, sir. And that was great, because when you run or architect applications of this scale, it is always important to understand your point of view in terms of how are you planning that scale, right? So just as an extension to that conversation, we all know that there's been an exponential rise in the demand for digital services during this pandemic, right? So how has NIC really scaled up the infrastructure to cater to that demand? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, as mentioned by DG NIC also, there has been an exponential rise in the requirement of the services during this particular period. See, the services like e-office or the video conferencing were in use earlier also. However, particularly for video conferencing, e-office, cloud services, there was a sudden rush of the demand, and these requirements really shot through the roof. So we, particularly coming to video conferencing solutions, NIC had its own solutions where software-based video conferencing was available, and then the studio-based video conferencing, point-to-point, multi-point, all these were available. However, NIC also used other platforms like Jitsi, etc., for open source, and other platforms such as WebEx and Microsoft Teams. So multiple platforms were used to scale up to the requirements. And apart from that, for the cloud services also, as you all understand and appreciate, there is infrastructure available, then all these services can be scaled up very easily. So what infrastructure was in use prior to the pandemic, that was itself was in heavy use. However, we made all efforts to see these resources were used more and more optimally and fulfill the demands which were made by the users. So that was the key to make use of these resources optimally. And of course, now even for the augmentation of our cloud services, we are making efforts so that, as DG mentioned, that this situation may remain for maybe 6 months to a year. So this is the time when we can augment our infrastructure and be in a position to provide resources on demand.
Sure. And scale is always a favorite topic when it comes to citizen services and government, right? Because whatever you all do, you all plan it for scale. So while you spoke about a few learnings from the architectures of applications like GSTN and so on, would you be able to shed some light on some of the key learnings from massive application architectures like Aadhaar and UPI, which are out there today, which are very successful models, as a model for building massive scale public digital platforms?
See, what I can see is microservices and containerized deployment of these applications, because you need to break down, because many of these applications were designed quite a few years back. And also these have matured over a period of time. So a lot of patchwork might have undergone in these applications. Perhaps some of these may not even have been anticipated so much growth in terms of usage. Like for example, Aadhaar itself, now you see it's providing so many services. So the Aadhaar authentication per day itself is a very, very large number. Or PFMS also, for that matter. When PFMS was established, it was started as a monitoring system, basically, MIS system. So when the DBT schemes got introduced, it really emerged as a very, very large platform. So when these applications were initially designed, these were not really architected in the sense that they can really scale up to that extent. So as DG had mentioned, that while the cloud services, etc., can be made available on demand, these are not really designed as cloud native applications. So the first thing what we are trying to do is to break these monolith applications into smaller modules or microservices, as you may call it, so that these can be, these are amenable, or really the cloud native applications which can be deployed on-prem or maybe on hybrid model.
Sure. That is interesting to learn. And it is interesting that you also spoke about refactoring or relooking at the application architecture when you're designing for scale, right? So one of the aspects I'm sure is around cybersecurity. So the next question is actually about cybersecurity. If you look at it today, is one of the critical concerns for government organizations, especially with this exponential growth of digital services that we are seeing. Can you share some of the best practices that other government organizations can also adopt when they are looking to deploy infrastructure and applications at the scale?
Yes. See, the cyber threats are ever increasing, and these malicious users are always going to be one step ahead. I mean, that's a fact of life. So we are always playing a catch-up game. Now, there are two ways. See, because in government setup, the employees, although they are, there has been increasing awareness about cybersecurity, still I feel that there's a lot more which can be done to educate the users in government, starting right from the lowest level of the government to the highest level in the government. There's a lot of awareness which needs to be created, particularly in terms of cyber hygiene. So particularly with the mobile devices being used more and more, and the threats emanate from these kind of devices. So there's a need to catch or rather have this kind of cyber awareness created at a very young age amongst the children when they are at the school level itself. That is of course one end of the spectrum, but on the other hand you also have the other end of the spectrum, the people who are little old and may not be very tech savvy. So there's a need to educate these people also, so that they are not exposed to the frauds. So which keep happening, banking, net banking, and taking OTPs and siphoning out the money from their accounts. So in that sense, there is a need to educate the people at an early age, also the people who are senior citizens. That is, of course, in terms of the general this thing. But at the government level also, there are needs for, apart from educating the users, which is an ongoing process, because new threats keep emerging. So there is a need for regular awareness, refresher programs. But apart from that, there is a need in terms of, if you really talk about technology interventions, whereas the centralized applications which are deployed in the data center or on cloud, they are secured by way of the security appliances in the data centers. However, applications need to go regular audits. Whenever there are any major updates being brought into the applications, have them security audited. So have this established as a practice. And apart from that, for need the solutions which need to be deployed for securing the desktops, the mobiles, the laptops, tablets, these kind of solutions need to be deployed at various offices of government. That will help in reducing the threats to a large extent.
I think that's a great response, and I completely agree with you. I think while we can throw technology at the problem, you hit the nail on the head when you spoke about empowerment and education of people who deal with technology, right? The elderly people today, kids who are working from home with their own devices, how can they get secure? So I think that's a very critical point. So thanks for stating that. And thank you, Mr. Shastri. I really think you answered the questions really well around scale of infrastructure, scale of applications. They need to relook at application architectures when you're dealing with citizen scale of India. And then finally, you spoke about cybersecurity being a key cog in the wheel when you're trying to define infrastructure and applications at the scale. So really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for answering all the questions for us.
Thank you.
Pragya, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us and giving time.